All right, we begin 5 to go here in the same kind of gear, I guess, a lot of people in NASCAR Nation are. We were just going through our normal days yesterday. Honestly, just like Greg Biffle and his family and the two pilots of his plane and his assistant and driver. All right, and things didn't turn on a Thursday like anybody expected it to. And we're here mourning a loss. So what we're going to do here on 5 to go today is a little bit different kind of a show. We are going to a little bit later touch on a little bit more fallout from the lawsuit. All right, just a little bit, and we're gonna, we're gonna kind of put a bow on that. Hopefully, of course, I think that's going to be a gift that keeps giving, storyline wise. But we're going to spend most of the time focusing on Greg Biffle and who he was, and also a little bit that we know about the others in that tragic plane crash in Biffle's jet at the Statesville Airport runway. As Jeff Gluck pointed out in his magnificent column on The Athletic, the same airport that Biffle borrowed someone else's helicopter to run supplies out to western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee after Hurricane Helene. So welcome to the show today. I'm Doug Fireball Turnbull from the traffic team with Rachel Cox-Rosen at 11 Alive. Also, AJC Gridlock Guy. Last print edition's coming up at the AJC there. And also, of course, part of the announcing team of Performance Racing Network. I did learn I'll be in 7 races next year. Excited about that. Joined here by, and I know it was already last week, but new college graduate for sure, minted in the book. He is for hire. University of North Georgia's Devin Kupka, our super racing fanalist, and our roving racing journo getting ready for 2026. Dev, and we'll introduce Dan in a second. Dev, just real quickly, your initial thoughts or things that you saw in middle and late day Thursday when this came out.
Yeah, it was just a tragic day yesterday for the Biffle family and everybody else that was involved in the plane crash there in North Carolina. And I thought it was really interesting to see. It took a while for it to officially be confirmed, but to see the gruesome details come out earlier. Cletus McFarland was expecting the Biffle family. They were going to do something, I think it was throughout the rest of the weekend. I forget what the thing was called, but they were getting together this weekend. And then for him to confirm that he was on that plane because Biffle was on his way to go see Cletus McFarland. Really just really sad to see stuff come out that way, and just not. It's just an ugly day yesterday.
Tragic too. Greg Biffle would have been 56 years old on December 23rd. So next week, Christmas Eve, Greg Biffle would have been 56 years old. So he dies at age 55, along with his wife Christina. Some people have had, there's someone on social media that used to work for Biffle that was, mourning, and of course, Nicole Lunders is Biffle's ex-wife. Some people, I think, still thought he was married to Nicole, but they got divorced several years ago. He remarried. They had, I believe it's a 5-year-old son, Ryder, who was also on the plane. His 11-year-old daughter, Emma, was Nicole's daughter. So Nicole is mourning the loss of her ex-husband, but of course the loss of her daughter, Emma. And then Christina, his wife. And I don't know much about her involvement, okay, but just the fact that she lent Biffle out to do so much humanitarian work the last few years. I say lent, but you know what I mean. Having to put up with her husband being gone and then supporting that in the way she did and the way the family did. It says a lot about her. The other people that were in this plane crash, and we'll get to Dan Elliott in just a moment. Craig Wadsworth, who I don't know much about him except that a lot of people in NASCAR know him. Kenny Wallace, and I do listen to the Coffee with Kenny and his podcast and so forth, or a lot of them anyway. But he was Kenny Wallace's bus driver for 6 years. And it appeared to me that he had a pretty close relationship with Michael Waltrip as well, just judging by Michael Waltrip's posts. And I didn't dig too much into it, but I think he's been a bus driver for different people in the NASCAR community for a long time. Kenny Wallace called him an excellent cook and said that Craig Wadsworth said to him, "Kenny, here's how I keep your plate clean when I'm your bus driver. No drama. No drama. If I have a flat tire, I'm not calling you to ask what to do. No drama." And so Kenny wanted to make a T-shirt, Craig Wadsworth, no drama, in his honor. And that's what I know about him. And the posts of him look incredible. Craig Wadsworth. Kenny also shared just kind of a haunting thing. Whenever you see like it's someone's last interview or the last thing they did, I just get I don't know how to describe it, but man. But Craig Wadsworth apparently was posted a lot on Snapchat, and his last snap was he was in Biffle's plane taxiing. All right. Just man, that's just a terrible thing. And then I don't know much about the pilots, but there were two on board. There was a pilot and his son, Dennis and Jack Dutton. I found a post as we were warming up on the show here from I believe it's the Cornelius Times, North Carolina. Jack Dutton was a Howe High School graduate in 2024, a sophomore at Auburn University. All right, he played on the tennis team at the school. Was a volunteer at the school as well, according to a school statement and then something posted in the Cornelius Times there. So right before Christmas, I want to say the names again. We're going to talk a lot about Greg Biffle because that's who I know. That's the big connection to NASCAR, all right? But right before Christmas, you lose these 7 people. I just want to say the names again, make sure I say them right, okay? So Craig Wadsworth, Dennis and Jack Dutton, and then Christina Ryder, Emma, and Greg Biffle. And rest in peace to them. Dan, I don't even know what to, when we say what's your reaction, it's like an obvious thing to say a reaction here. But you followed this sport for a long time, and I posted a video about this on social media yesterday. How many times over the years, and it's not like it's every year, but how many times the NASCAR communities either had a near miss, a scare, or a shocking tragedy involving aviation, and you were in the garage when these things, when they happened twice in the same year, in 1993 with Kowicki and Allison. So, what crossed your mind with some of this? And I know your family's big into aviation too.
There are no words to give to anyone regarding the loss because across the board with everyone on the plane, it is devastating. And seemingly what makes it so much more devastating is the fact that it was all 7 at one time. It was this tragic a loss at one time, and we've heard about this in other areas, other realms of whether it be car wrecks, so forth. And it's just sad that the holidays and everything, and you think about the whole family just gone in an instant, and it makes you realize how delicate life is and how quickly it can be snuffed out.
Gosh,
and,
yeah.
And it lends into the season that we're in for me because it really does bring it to home on trying to make the best of every day, trying to make the best of all of your relationships. You can't control every relationship, but you can do your best to try to turn things if you possibly can. And that's what I look at. And it is devastating. And I'm amazed that because you look at how many teams travel now by aircraft and how many flights are on the air, because you look at FlightAware or Flight Radar or any of the apps that you can find, and you look at the number of aircraft that's in the air in any given time during the day or even a lot at night. And you'll see how incredibly fortunate, how incredibly experienced, how incredibly awesome all these people are that do fly and do this for a living and do this day in and day out, and how fortunate we all have been, because the credit to FAA and all the people that control this, but also to the pilots and the people that take it upon themselves every day to jump in these things and go, whether and just like I noticed in the video, the weather wasn't that good when they left.
No.
And I don't know, it may or may not. I'm going to wait on the report to see what the official report says before I do any conjecture on that. But the race teams, they've got to be there regardless of the weather. They've got to leave and get there, and it's really a credit to the people that do this, how experienced they are and what a good job they do.
Well, the fact that it doesn't happen more often. Mark Martin said, and I'm paraphrasing what he posted on X about this situation, particularly involving aviation. All right, we're going to get to Biffle in a second. He said it's a shame because aviation really is truly safe, but a shame how much the NASCAR community has been affected by different factors that have made things go wrong by plane or helicopter. To go in a little bit of order in that, and Dan, if I missed something, please fill it in. Of course, Devin, if you think of something. I tried to encapsulate a few of these, and I left a couple of them out when I did this, yesterday when I recorded it back on Thursday. I was asked by 11 Alive to just do a quick mobile video about it. That's basically what I did. But you go back to 1993, the reigning Cup champion Alan Kulwicki crashes in the mountains near Bristol Motor Speedway. Later that summer, another big superstar in the sport, Bobby Allison's son Davey, crashes a helicopter trying to land at Talladega Superspeedway, almost kills Red Farmer, who's in the NASCAR Hall of Fame. You go forward just a little bit. Did Mark Martin's dad, Dan, did Mark Martin's dad, Julian, die of a heart attack? He died suddenly. That wasn't a plane deal, was it, or do you remember?
I thought it was a plane crash. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Let me pull that up. That was in 1998.
I thought that was a plane crash. And you've got to understand that Lisa Kennedy's husband as well.
Yes. I was getting to that. Yeah. So that was, I looked up because I had forgot. Yeah. So it's very fitting. Mark Martin, the pilot himself, says it. So yeah, in August 10th or August of 1998, Mark Martin's dad, Julian, who paved the way of his racing career, killed in a plane crash. All right. Now, and I may be leaving a couple of out. Jack Roush has almost killed himself twice flying planes, and I think he lost an eye or heavily damaged his eye in one of those crashes. The second of those two, I think they're finally, okay, you're not flying anymore, bro. You're out. All right, thank God he survived. Dale Earnhardt Jr., crash landing, August of 2019. Scary stuff. 2007, Dr. Bruce Kennedy, Lisa France Kennedy's husband and the father of Ben Kennedy, so you could call him the grandson-in-law of the founder Bigfoot Bill France of NASCAR. He was killed in a situation where a NASCAR plane, they didn't check an electrical problem that had already shown up. I just looked at it a second ago. I forgot that when that plane crashed, it crashed and killed 2 people on the ground, not to mention, including a child, not to mention the 2 people on board. Yep. And again, I'm not saying this is because of NASCAR, because of the sport or anything. It's just, it's incredible how many times this has touched this community. That was 2007. Now, we skipped a huge one, 2004, and I remember watching the Martinsville race when they called off the Victory Lane celebration after Jimmy Johnson won. And it was because the Hendrick Motorsports plane killing 10 people in and around that team crashed. Atlanta Motor Speedway was the next weekend. And that was also bad weather in the mountains near Martinsville. All right. Atlanta Motor Speedway was the next weekend. They had this huge press conference with all 4 HMS drivers. And then Denny Hamlin goes out on Sunday and wins the race with the, just a storybook type situation. The 10 people killed in that plane crash, company president John Hendrick, who I believe that was Rick's brother, Dan, if I'm not mistaken. I'm trying to think back. Rick's son, Ricky. Tony Stewart's helicopter pilot, Scott Latham. There were the pilots on board as well, Richard Tracy and Elizabeth Morrison, a DuPont executive, Joe Jackson. That was the sponsor of Jeff Gordon at the time. That's who Exalta is now, is DuPont, basically. Chief engine builder, Randy Dorton. Jennifer and John Hendrick's daughters, Jennifer and Kimberly, and the general manager of Hendrick Motorsports, Jeff Turner, all just like that. 10 people. October 2004. We mentioned 2007, the Kennedys, the close calls there with Jack Roush, the Dale Earnhardt Jr. situation. And there may be one or two. Someone wrote in there was one I'd forgotten, but one or two that I have, may have omitted. But then this one here with Greg Biffle, just really sad stuff. So I'm not going to, I'm not trying to live in the gloom. But when you have an organization or a group of organizations, NASCAR and the teams and the drivers, that are flush with money and have deadlines, have places to be and need to get there fast. Even the small teams are part of a charter. A lot of times are buy seats on charter airlines to get right to and right from the track and land right near their race shop. It's just, when something does go wrong, it's usually really big. So,
well, you take this for granted that every time you get on a plane that it's going to be okay. And you're going to get on and you're going to get off at your destination. And that is not always the case.
Yeah, it really true. So There's bad weather up there. The plane took off reportedly, and then was coming right back to the airport and crashed hard too. So something obviously went terribly wrong, and it's just horrible stuff. Um, Dan, I know Bill and Chase very much into aviation, and then you guys all have spaces right there on the airport, right? Can you tell me, like, is the airport have a name? Is it open to anybody else? And then how much are you and Ernie involved in aviation? And when did that kind of bloom, I guess, over the time coming out of the 80s and so forth?
We all have our pilot's license. It all comes down to justifying an airplane. There is what, especially for me, I can say that for me, it's you really have
Yeah,
to justify one. And since I don't go on the road anymore, since I don't travel like I used to, I like to recreationally fly. I have my license. I don't have a plane anymore. I had one for a while, but yeah, that's it's justified for. Um, More so for Bill when he was traveling as much as he was before, but more so
sure,
for Chase now. But the things are based on the field here. It's a private airport, and there is a number listed on the old interweb that you can call and get permission to land. But pretty much the main thing is it's private field, so you're at your own risk. Even if you do have permission, you're at your own risk. So um, it's kind of like the buyer beware, but um, it is um, it is kind of a labor of love. It's one of those things where aviation is not the cheapest thing going, but as
no,
Doug, as you alluded to, when you've got to be at a certain place at a certain time, but also too you've got to base that on your experience level of how many hours you've got and how good a pilot you are and knowing the procedures of what to do and weather and so forth. And you really do have to fly to be proficient. You really need to fly at least once a week, if not every day, to be proficient. Because when things go wrong, it's all good when things are right, but when it goes wrong, you're traveling, depending on what aircraft you're in, you're traveling at either a mile a minute or 2 or 3 miles a minute. Things happen fast, and the airspace gets congested a lot of times. And as we've heard before, using the radios and communicating with FAA, the tower, so forth, the people that keep you safe, a lot of times other people are already talking. You walk over somebody else. So communication may take a little while. Well, you don't have that little while to communicate. So things happen fast. You need to know the procedures and what to do to keep yourself safe and your family, because it's not just you. It's
right.
everybody. You're responsible for, as a pilot, you're responsible for all the souls on board that plane.
That's a great point. And people on the ground too. If you aren't able to land and you crash, like the case of the NASCAR jet there, that ended up or affected people on the ground. But this is an industry that's endemic to that because you have 38 race weekends. You're bringing a lot of people into one place. Excuse me. You're bringing a lot of people into one place, and they're going to happen every so often. It's a shame how much it's touched this community in particular, this really tight knit NASCAR community, and you see how tight knit it is. The entire sport. It's like golf. The entire sport, or the PGA, is all in one space at once. Tennis is similar. The upper echelon of tennis is similar. Most sports, it's 30 something teams spread out, 15 games at a time all over the country. And it's not like that in NASCAR. So when it happens and you see them 38 weekends in a row, imagine hanging out with the same friends 38 weekends in a row. All right.
That'd be like
Dev,
family, wouldn't it?
Dev, you love your friends, but
It
Dev,
feels
38
like
weekends
UNG
in a row.
athletics.
Maybe you would have fun with them. That's fair. That's fair. But it's like, yeah, that's a lot. Um, and other sports, I think about it. Baseball, Roy Halladay, just a few years ago, ace Major League Baseball pitcher. he died in a plane crash off of Florida. Corey Lytle, and these are off the top of my head. I'm going to forget some. Corey Lytle, pitcher for the Yankees, crashed into a building in New York in 2006. Thurman Munson of the Yankees, Dan will remember that. Thurman Munson, who late 70s, I think it was, a Yankees player, Yankee star. He died in a plane crash. Roberto Clemente, I think, died on a humanitarian mission to Puerto Rico, right? It was Puerto Rico, right? Roberto Clemente. They had the Clemente Award in Major League Baseball. And then very recently, and again, I am, there are many more that have happened, okay? But very recently, just 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago now, Kobe Bryant, early January 2000, before COVID went crazy, but they died in a situation in a helicopter where, I mean, they had no business probably flying in those mountains with the fog and everything it was. That Kobe Bryant deal, by the way, happened just 2 days after I had my first unscheduled landing in the traffic helicopter for WSB Radio. It was unscheduled. We were not in near, it's not like there was a mechanical failure, but a huge blanket of fog started coming in. You could just see it coming in. And we were around Truist Park flying. So for those that are not from Atlanta, that's just a little bit northwest of downtown Atlanta. Our airport that we fly in and out of, DeKalb Peachtree Airport, or flew out of, is a little bit northeast of Metro Atlanta. So we were just going to follow Interstate 285, Atlanta's bypass, called the perimeter, and fly it around and then go land and beat the fog. And they were texting us. Actually, you know what? It just occurred to me, the guy that was texting us telling us to come in used to be Biffle's helicopter pilot. I need to reach out to him. Okay, I need to put a pin in that, okay? But they were texting us, hey, y'all might want to come in. It's really bad. And we didn't get in time. And we're flying around again. Atlanta listeners will know what I'm talking about. We're flying in Dunwoody, and our pilot is trying to gain elevation to get above the cloud bank and see where we are. And he thought we were near, and he was not. He was a great pilot, this guy. He thought we were near the King and Queen building, which is in Sandy Springs, and they're, 20-something stories tall. All right? It was a billboard. That's how disorienting bad weather and fog is.
Yep.
A billboard, which is what, 8 stories off the ground? Not even that. Versus that. So maybe I'm boring you all the details, but we had to. So when we realized that, we're like, okay, ain't no landing here. We're done. And we got way above the fog layer and flew out west of downtown Atlanta to Fulton County Airport and landed there. And then we were going to wait out the fog. And then the forecast said the fog wasn't going to clear until the middle of the night. So we had to Uber home and leave our helicopter at a different airport. And I met Charles Barkley when that happened. So there you go. This story ain't all about me and all that stuff, but it's just crazy things can happen in the air when something goes wrong. Thank God for the number of people that fly. The percentage is minuscule in comparison. So, Dev,
Now,
I want to come to you. Go
how
ahead.
many times have
Sorry,
you
Dan.
flown, Doug, and you've been above the clouds, and it's like someone rolled out just a flat layer of cotton, and it's just as
Yep.
beautiful as you ever saw, and then pure sunshine above it.
It's crazy, and we see that in a commercial flight too, right? But certainly in the helicopter. Usually, though, when it was like that in the helicopter, it'll be hugging the Chattahoochee River here in Atlanta. The fog is like really confined, but sometimes you have that, and you're like, oh gosh, and you just got to go find a clear spot, and then hopefully a way back home.
We were on the way to Pocono, one of the trips up there. We were in a single engine, and we had 6 people aboard, and the pilot came on the little intercom that's in the airplane, and he said, everybody kind of look out of the window, just careful how you lean over, don't put all the weight on that side of the plane at one time, but kind of look out the window on the left side and look at what's out there. And we were flying over one of those blankets of pure white that was just absolutely beautiful, and sunshine, this brilliant sunshine above it, and look out the left window. And we're flying at 5,000 feet above the ground, and there's an antenna coming up out of those clouds. An antenna.
God.
And it's the top of one of the mountains up in the Poconos. And that tells you what danger lies below, that you have no clue what's going on.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And there's so much robotic instrumentation and things that can guide through this, but you still need a pilot with their experience to know do this when X, 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 and X happen. Yeah,
And do it
that's unsettling.
very quickly and proficiently.
Correct. And, it could have been one of these things in Biffle's flight, where maybe there was a mechanical thing or something, and then when they turned back, the bad weather caused a misjudgment. And TSP's investigated. We don't know, but it could have been. Some people just immediately go, well, it was raining. It's the weather. It has to be that. Well, planes fly in bad weather all the time.
Yep.
There, it was a 1981 Cessna. I read. I was like, gosh, I didn't know how long people kept jets. I didn't realize that, but that's, never know what could go on. Dev, when he was talking about the cloud layer, you were about to say something, and I think I talked over you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was in a commercial airline flight actually on my way to Los Angeles a few months ago, and it was at nighttime. And when you get over there, it's interesting to see. It's like it felt like I was on a different planet because the moon was out. It was reflecting off the clouds below. Couldn't see anything underneath. It was interesting.
But I'm glad both of you
had
had those
failure
views.
at that time.
Ugh. How about no time? That's
Yeah, how about
it could
no
be
time?
it could be 10 miles of visibility and sunny and clear and no. You mentioned Chase and Bill needed, the aviation. A lot of people know that, Chase does not live in the Concord, Charlotte area, right? He does not. He does on purpose, lives here in North Georgia and flies, either joins those team meetings privately or not privately, what's the word I'm looking for? Virtually, or if he has to, flies to different things, and I'm sure it has to cross his parents' mind or people that are close to his mind, Dan, like, man, he's flying a lot. Dang, what happens by the way, what did Bill do? And I asked Chase once about even having to drive after a race and win when he won Atlanta. And he's like, yeah, I just drive home all the way to Dawsonville. I was like, what? That seems crazy to me that you would be driving yourself home after celebrating a win. And that doesn't mean he was drinking at Victory Day. He said they would party at the house. But it's like, you just drove for 3 or 4 hours and then 2 hours of interviews, and then you got to drive 2 hours home after being on at the track all day.
That deal for him is probably like the deal for me, where you work pit road all day and you've been up since 5 o'clock that morning. You worked all day long, and you that's just the way it was, period. But you get so hyped, you are so keyed up that drive time for me in the truck back was my time to kind of get myself calm back down and get relaxed a little bit. It was my time, and I could kind of control that, and I could do everything at my own pace, my own speed, and kind of key down, so to speak. And it was a good time for me after the races were over, coming back in the truck. That was my time, and I enjoyed that time. And like I said, I could kind of put things in of the day in their perspective, and it really did help me to relax, believe it or not, driving back.
I saw you nodding in agreement, Devin, because you've driven to just about every race you've covered, and you love driving. I saw you nodding in agreement there on the coming down off of the adrenaline high.
Yeah, well, I would say if you're talking about party and celebration, it just reminds me of some things, that some local teams that they got to decompress for a little bit and then you go celebrate later.
That's a good point.
It's not right away. Boom, boom,
No.
boom, boom. Let's wait. There's got to be that dying down, that cooling off period.
I want to get to Greg Biffle now. And we mourn the loss of everybody, but the person we know the most that, really, this would have been national headlines of 7 people dying in a plane crash anywhere. But certainly when it's somebody who's a fringe NASCAR Hall of Famer and the whole deal, a champion and the what's now called the NASCAR Riley Auto Parts Series. I've even forgotten he was a champion in trucks. Like, this is so long ago. And Corey Hine broke his wins record in trucks, by the way, scoring the 10 or 11 wins this year. Biffle had 9 in 1999. So that's something. But Biffle, as a Cup Series driver, 19 race wins. 19, 1-9er.
Yeah.
It's more than I thought. I thought it was more like 12 to 15, 19 wins. He didn't win since 2013. He had 3 more full-time seasons after that, and then ran 5 races in 2022 with NY Racing, but 19 Cup wins. Second in the points 2005. As Jeff Gluck pointed out, he was a tire failure at Texas away probably for being the 2005 champion. And that season, by the way, he won 6 races. He had a stretch, Greg Biffle did, starting in 2003, his rookie year, where he won the Daytona Summer Race, where he won 1 or 2 races a year each year from 2003 through 8. And that included a 6-win year in 2005. But it was like 1, 2, 6, 2, 1, 2. He went winless in 09. Then he won 2 races in 2010, 2 in 2012, and his last Cup win in 2013. In the Xfinity Series, make that 20 career wins in Xfinity, and he was the 2002 champion. Driving a lot of those Rouse cars, by the way. And then 17 Truck Series wins, including one. You know which one I'm talking about, guys. The Biff, his last big muscle in a race car. 2019, he hadn't driven anything in a couple years, 3 years. Kyle Busch, whose Truck Series team was struggling except when Kyle drove for it, okay? He gets the Biff out of retirement in Texas, plucks him in. I think it was the 51 truck, and he wins. 49 years old. That's some BA behavior right there, buddy. That's what can you say about that? I remember watching that going, dang, son. And he was widely regarded as someone who had a lot of raw talent, probably was discovered for NASCAR a little bit late. You know, he there was probably 5 or 6 years he could have had in the Cup career that he didn't get to have. And then it just, after a few fruitless seasons, Roush Fenway Racing, which is now called RFK, parted ways with him there. And that was basically it for that. Now, in recent times, besides the humanitarian work, Biffle, he ran a little bit of ARCA West last year. He ran a truck race also in 2020, just a one-off deal. He ran a little bit of ARCA West, I believe, in Portland. I'll look that up in just a second. But he was spotted a lot with, oh yeah, brother, Cletus McFarland, who Garrett Mitchell is what shows up on the column when he's racing, but he's been his driver coach and been doing a lot of stuff at McFarland's Freedom Factory, where they were going to have a drag racing event Devin alluded to earlier this weekend. They're still having that event, but Cletus McFarland's not going to do a meet and greet anymore. They're going to still race, though. But Biffle was basically his driving coach. And there's some fascinating video that McFarland put out of getting ready for Daytona and Talladega, and Biffle telling him what to do. You know, very basics, right? But stuff also that you hear him talk about. Biffle just talks about it like he does it all the time still. Shows how, you know, manicured he was as far as racing goes. And then, of course, the humanitarian efforts there. So when I come to you, Devin, who you didn't start following this sport until after Biffle was done full-time racing, what do you think of when you think of Greg Biffle? What is your impression of him, having not watched him win races in person like Dan and I have, maybe?
Well, as you mentioned, I kind of remember him more for his humanitarian efforts over the past year with Hurricane Helene in western North Carolina. That's one thing that I'll remember mostly about him, because I was not really around the sport of NASCAR until after he retired. But I will say one thing. It was very cool that I got to see. It was last year when I was covering the UNG men's basketball team when they made their trip to the Elite Eight, Evansville, Indiana. The arena that the Elite Eight in Division II for men's basketball that's played in every year it's called the Ford Center in Evansville, Indiana. And in the front lobby area in Evansville, they have like the Ford pickup truck. They have like a Ford Fusion. I think there's a Mustang there too. I posted this picture up on my X page. But in the center of it all, it's like on the front doors, but then there's this like overhang over it. They have, and Ford could have chosen at the time, because this looks like this is probably mid-2010s. They could have chosen Team Penske, driver from Penske, Wood Brothers, but they decided to go with a Greg Biffle car, and it was hanging right up there. And I thought that was really cool that, you know, as I mentioned, they could have gone with anybody else at the time, but they decided to go with Greg Biffle. And that's, if you ever go check out an event there at the Ford Center in Evansville, Indiana, as of 2024, the car is still hanging up there.
That's pretty cool. The Biff. And then pretty recognizable, number 16. It was National Guard, and 3M, I think, is the paint scheme you probably associate the most with that. But yeah, he had a lot of different sponsors for that deal over the years. But that 16 was pretty prominent there, and it had that kind of sort of airbrush look with the numbers, kind of those jagged sort of edges on that 1 and 6 there. If you don't know what we're talking about, look up Greg Biffle, number 16. Pretty cool looking race cars over the time there for what was then Roush Fenway Racing. Now, Dan, when I say Greg Biffle to you, and you've seen the greats up close, Biffle was, probably to me someone I put in the hall of pretty good. But man, that just reading that stat sheet, you're like, boy, if you told a driver you could have a career where you did that, I think almost every driver would take that, right? So, what is your impression of the Biff?
My impression is when I was at Gresham 2012. I knew Greg some around the track and had spoke to him a couple of times, and the fact that he was just so personable, and that was what really stood out to me is you could walk up and talk to him and he would talk to you like you were his equal. It wasn't anything. He felt like he was better than anybody. You were his equal. You talked about things. You had things that you could relate to and talk about and easy to talk to. But he came to Gresham over there in 2012 and driving for Roush, and they had already ran a number of laps, and they were in the midst of doing a change on the car, and I didn't realize what they were doing that day because I tried to not to ask a lot of questions, but they had five rolling shelves that were 4-tier that were loaded with front end suspension parts. And there were
Wow.
5 of those shelving units sitting there, and they were pulling stuff off the car, getting ready to put the components of one of the rolling carts on the car. And I found out later that day, I talked to Jimmy Finney, crew chief, and he was talking about the fact that they were trying different front end suspension components, getting ready for Martinsville was coming up. So I figured that they were trying to figure out what was the best combination to go to Martinsville with, not only for that car, but probably for all of the Roush cars. They were trying to figure out something unique about it. But they were running 200 laps with each rolling shelf, and they came with one of the configurations under the car. He did 1,200 laps that day. That was what impressed me the most was 1,200. They ran all day long, and he never missed a beat, and he always missed the wall. He never messed up the whole day, and they ran hard all day long.
And he's what, in his mid-40s then, right? I mean,
yeah.
that's incredible.
That's incredible.
Wow. Yeah. He's just a very solid and dependable driver. And unfortunately, it's easy to lump him in with the decline of Roush. There was a point where it was Greg Biffle, Trevor Bayne, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. were the bell cows at Roush Fenway. And,
I think the saddest part of that is the fact that he didn't win a Cup championship. I think that was, to me, the hardest part, kind of like Mark Martin.
Yeah.
That was the hardest part of that deal was that I wish that fate would have fell the way that he could have pulled off a Cup championship before he retired.
That's a great point. So many, Carl Edwards, Casey Kane. We're looking at the last couple of rounds of Denny Hamlin's career, especially after the heartbreak at Phoenix there. Yeah, it's like, man, it's tough to imagine, that many opportunities, especially in the chase format where things get reset there late in the season. I'll tell you about, with me, I didn't get to even ever do what I would consider a one-on-one interview with Biffle. You, Dan, probably had more one-on-one time chit-chatting in the garage or something. I didn't really have that. But there were several times I saw him with the media, and other media people that dealt with him way more than me affirmed this, but where he was very quotable, very conversational, did not, just like you talked about in those experiences one-on-one, he didn't seem to treat, I'm sure he had his moments, but he didn't seem to treat the media like it was just beneath him.
I
Maybe
think the moments were
he
with,
came and he gave you his honest thoughts.
I think the moments might have been with Sterling Marlin.
What's that? You mean where Sterling Marlin thought it was all beneath him, or what do you mean?
No, it was just they had a couple of run-ins on the track, and you can read about it in some of the past racing journals about their conversations together.
I need to look that up. I don't remember. I remember a lot of those, especially from that time. I do not remember
Yeah.
that. I need to look that up. Um, there was a time where Joey Logano's dad tried to fight Greg Biffle for wrecking Joey Logano in an Xfinity Series race. I'm like, okay, that's a little much. Tom, back off. All right. But I want to say though, there was this one time in particular, and a lot of people listening will remember this. 2007. Carl Edwards comes up behind Matt Kenseth while Kenseth's getting interviewed, I think on the Speed Channel, and acts like he wants to fight Kenseth at Martinsville. And it's like, what? Edwards was just like ticked off at something Kenseth did on the track, and Edwards has since atoned for this stuff, okay? But at the time, it was rough. And Atlanta's the next weekend. All right, and this is when I was young, early 20s. So I just asked drivers whatever. It was my only chance. I didn't get a chance to go hang out in the garage with them, and they didn't do the media bullpens like they do with us now since COVID. No, there was just, you have a press conference? Okay, I'm taking up everybody's time asking whatever dumb question I want to ask. And I didn't really care if it was a brash question at all at that time. And I said, hey, Greg, given the situation with Edwards and Kenseth last week in Martinsville, what is the chemistry like, at Roush Fenway right now? Basically, I asked him that. I was like, what do you think about? How do you size that up? Does there need to be a different leadership or something there? Because this was the first year that Mark Martin was gone. All right, Biffle must have talked. It felt like for 10 minutes, and was very thoughtful in what he said. And it became some of the most quotable stuff out of that situation from that weekend, all right? And that's not to me. I'm saying to Biffle's attribution. And I remember afterwards, Dan, Captain Herb, I'm saying Dan because he knew Captain Herb, all right, Devin, I'm not cutting you out. But he called, and he played a bit of it on the show, on the racing show he had. It was his show, but that I was on with him. And he goes, Detective Turnbull asking Greg Biffle the hard questions. So anyway, I just said thanks to Biffle for giving me that little moment with there. That was fun. And yeah, I don't have anything bad to say about him. He's not somebody I thought about a ton. I think about the great drivers of all time, but he was named, as the crew at The Athletic said, one of NASCAR's top 75 drivers of all time. And even though that seems like a lot, that is a small list in comparison to everybody that grabbed a pretty wheel. So Godspeed to Greg Biffle there. And to everybody else, of course, in that plane crash here, ahead of the holidays. Dan, Devin, anything else y'all want to say about Biffle? Then we're going to touch on one quick thing post-lawsuit and then get out because Dev's got work. Anything, guys?
No.
Feel like we said it all, man. There's been some great coverage on this, some great writing on it. Be sure, if you only knew Biffle as race cars and stats, there were a lot of people that cared about him for what happened in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. He really got a lot of attention because of that. And I mean, got a lot of attention. He was helping other people, dropping Starlinks and food and all that stuff. So, bone up on that. There's a lot of that being covered and a lot of it being relived right now. Elsewhere, kind of in the current racing world, there have been some crew chief announcements, a little this and that, but no major stories. We don't know what the points format is, for instance. I don't think we're going to learn until they do the rules bulletin ahead of production days and all that in January. So we can let that rest for a moment. And a week ago, we'll talk about stark differences in posture. Last Friday, it was the post-lawsuit aura. That was the name of our episode. In fact, we gave our thoughts on that. Find that on wherever you're hearing the show. Go back to the last episode if you missed it. You can see what we thought about everything. But you're kind of like, hey, everybody, kumbaya, my lord, kumbaya. And then on X this week, Lenny, I don't know where that came from, Larry McReynolds was previewing his daily show, and Denny Hamlin replied to the post on X and asked Larry Mack if he was going to apologize for, basically I'm going to paraphrase this correctly. One of y'all correct me if I get this wrong. But basically, Larry Mack, at the time the lawsuit was announced, or it was getting ready to get ramp up, Larry Mack said, "Why are they even coming in? This sport's been around forever without them. They don't need to come in and tear it all down. They've got no chance." And blah 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 blah. And Denny Hamlin was basically asking for an apology. Devin, it looks like you've got a thought.
Hey, I don't think where Larry McReynolds is coming from, I don't think he's wrong about what he said, because before this trial happened, we really didn't see teams go after NASCAR. So I see where he's coming from, and I don't have a problem with what he said. Now, Front Row Motorsports 2311 at the end of the day won the lawsuit, so they're able to talk all the crap they want now. But I just find the whole
all the
thing
teams
funny.
ended up winning, but yeah. It's a great point. It seemed like a quixotic effort in some ways because no one had ever challenged NASCAR. I'm thinking if I win the case, I don't need anybody to apologize to me. I can just go count my money or count my victories, because the victory overall, the Evergreen Charters, is like, that's the thing that's going to pay dividends. So just take your dub. I don't think we need anybody to apologize. One thing that was brought up, though, is Hamlin was critical of SiriusXM because they had Jeffrey Kessler, the lawyer, on Dave Moody's show right when the lawsuit was announced in 2024. And when they podcasted the show later, put it on demand, they edited the entire interview out because SiriusXM has a license from NASCAR to have that channel, right? It's very much kid-tested, NASCAR approved, if you will. So that's where some of the beef comes from. And also remember too, and this wasn't brought up, but Larry Mack is the one that said, well, some drivers that haven't won any championships are really critical of this format. And it was like he was throwing shade on Mark Martin and Denny Hamlin, who've been really critical of the format too. There's also some bad blood there. Dan, anything to say about beef? It's what's for dinner.
I think that I think Denny is being Denny, and I like that about him as far as being able to come out and say what he thinks and not be afraid to say that when he knows he's, for the most part, right about what he's talking about. But I think this could also be a deal where Denny is serving notice that this happened here at this point in time. So you better be careful down the road in the future of what you're talking about to not exert a lot of your opinion into this and stick more to the facts of the matter. And that, to me, is what's changed the most out of this trial, is that it does show you that change is definitely in the air. And I told you back episodes ago that the deal with Michael Jordan coming into this sport, he didn't just raise the bar, he took it to a whole new universe. And this is part of it, because now, whether you know it or not, you have franchises. You don't have charters anymore. You have franchises. And this does, to me, all of this, my opinion, is the fact that it brings all of the current owners to billionaire status. This is an elite group now that you will play the devil getting into unless you are just absolutely filthy rich, or you garner together a group of people that's willing to come in and spend a lot of money in the sport. I think this just puts it at a whole new level, and I don't think that anyone really knows. They've thought about this, but I don't think anyone really knows where this is going to go to and ultimately settle at, because I've looked at what I thought charter franchise prices may be, and even how many there ultimately will be when the smoke clears. Will there be, in the short term or the long term, the ability to get into a race without a franchise? And I would say in the short term, maybe yes, but in the long term, I would say that aspect of it will go away.
Yeah, well, that's a great point. That's a great point. The barriers to entry for sure. But yeah, the beef is there, and I would like to see, I'd like to hear the first actions detrimental post lawsuit that's actually a new episode and not a best of, and hear what Denny has to say. And, and hopefully, though, it could be let's get together and make the sport better, and not doing a huge victory lap
Doug,
and demanding apologies and all that.
Let me say this also, with going through this lawsuit with all of the notable attorneys and consultants and so forth, they have educated themselves to an all new level that we will probably bit by bit get to see in the future what comes out. But they have gathered together a lot of experience in litigation and so forth, and they have learned a lot in the last 6 months to a year that you and I would not learn in a lifetime.
That's a great. Well, there's stuff that people that have followed this sport like us for a lifetime thought we'd never learn, like how much the Francis make and the ownership structure and the boards and some of the teams make and all that. So that's what I actually liked about the lawsuit, is that we finally got to see it. At what cost, remains to be seen. Hey, real quickly, just a couple of other headlines. We're going to sign off. Dev's got work over here. Truck Series news, Tanner Gray, Gio Ruggiero, they returned to Tricon Garage. We know Caden Honeycutt has already ended up back over there, or has transitioned from the Halmar Frieza team, Nice Motorsports before that, over to the Toyota Tricon team. Jimmy Johnson's announced he's competing in the Daytona 500 again, the number 84 Carvana Toyota. Connor Zillage, no surprise, competing in the top class in the Rolex 24 this year. Spire Motorsports has announced its crew chiefs. That was already pretty well taken care of, but no mention of Chris Gabehart and where he's going to be at. A couple other smaller moves too, but those are really kind of the biggest things that have happened this week, aside from the tragedy there. So Godspeed again to all the families involved, that involved in that horrible plane crash there in North Carolina, and to everybody that's just feels the loss of someone that they got to see on TV and hear on the radio and online and stuff each week at Greg Biffle. So really tough deal there. That's my final thought. Devin, last show before Christmas here. Any thoughts from you?
Yeah, just getting ready for the Christmas season. And if you're ever going to a Falcons or even a Jets game on the road and you're taking a vacation, the best part about that weekend will be whatever happens before the game. That'll be my final thought.
What was her name, Devin? Dua Lipa?
Yeah.
I love it, man. Well, I'm glad you had a good time, and we'll only guess how great the pregame was for you guys. Okay, we will only guess. Dan, for you, sir.
I would say to you and yours, everybody have a happy holiday, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year. And if you've got things going on, try to lay it down and enjoy family. And even if there is some differences, which over the course of the past, since COVID and everything else, we've seen so much political unrest and so forth, lay it down and have a good holiday. And just remember that you only pass through this way one time, and you better make the best of it.
We have seen in the national news cycle before the plane crash news, the slaughter of Rob Reiner and his wife out in Hollywood. All right. The shooting in Australia, horrible deal. The shooting at Brown University. It's been a downer kind of a week here leading up to Christmas and into now it's the middle of Hanukkah. So y'all, please don't take any of it for granted. And I know people, they can't wait to get away from the dinner table and all the family they only see once or twice a year. You never know when it's going to be the last time or your last time there too. So just remember that, folks. Also remember, this is a season of generosity. We all have extra. I mean, Dan, Devin, and I all have backgrounds at our shot, okay? We all have extra. You know what I mean? We all have it somewhere. Others first, then yourself. And I'm glad that that's the main thing that people are remembering about Greg Biffle and his family. All right. We're on Apple and Spotify, YouTube, our Facebook page, and everything. We'd love to hear from you, but even more than that, we'd love for all of you to have a happy holidays. And we'll talk to you sometime next week, maybe right before the new year here on the 5 to Go podcast. God bless.